it's Jonathan, and welcome to another episode of Sigillum Multarum. Today we are going to talk about the flag of Barbados, an island country located in the Caribbean. More specifically, it is the easternmost island in the Lesser Antilles. Barbados is 34 kilometers long and 24 kilometers wide, with a total area of 430 square kilometers. As of 2019, it has a population of 287,025,025 people. The country's capital is located in Bridgetown, home to 110,000 people spread out among 40 square kilometers of land. Those of you who are into music will know Barbados as the home country of the singer Rihanna. This video is being released on November 30th to mark two different occasions in Barbadian history. Firstly, on this day in 1966, Barbados, a former British colony, became independent from the United Kingdom as a Commonwealth realm, a sovereign state that has the British monarch as its formal head of state, but which functions as an independent country in any other way. This is the same system of government used in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. In addition, if you have been reading the news lately, you will know that back in September 2020, the Barbadian government announced its intentions to abolish the Barbadian monarchy and turn Barbados into a republic by November 30th, 2021, the 50th anniversary of Barbadian independence. That proposal was easily passed, and on October 6th this year, the Parliament of Barbados amended the country's constitution to replace the monarchy with a ceremonious president, with effect today. It is not every day that a new republic is proclaimed, so I decided to mark the occasion with a new episode of Sigillum Multarum. In this video we will go over the history of Barbadian flags, and then the symbolism of the current one. Now, let's begin with this video. Colonial History. At some time between the 4th and 7th centuries, the first civilizations on the islands of Barbados were known to have settled there. Indigenous peoples that migrated to Barbados from what is now Venezuela. Modern historians refer to these first settlers of Barbados as the Saladoid Barrancoid peoples. They were then joined by further waves of Native Americans in the 800s and the mid-1200s as part of the Arawak peoples that inhabited and continue to inhabit other parts of South America and the Caribbean. These Arawaks referred to the land that is now Barbados by the name Ichiruganaim, variously translated as either Red Land with White Teeth or Redstone Island with Teeth outside. And depending on who you ask, the teeth are either waves that had the color of human teeth or the reefs surrounding the island. However, like most Native Americans, the indigenous peoples of Barbados did not use flags. As usual, it was only when European colonial powers discovered these lands, beginning in the late 1400s and into the 1500s, that flags began to fly there. It is unknown for certain which European colonial empire first arrived in Barbados, though most historians and the tourism website of Barbados itself state that it was first discovered by Portuguese sailors who were traveling to their colonies in Brazil. In fact, the name Barbados itself may have come from either the Portuguese phrase Os Barbados, meaning the bearded ones, or the Spanish equivalent Los Barbados. Some say the bearded ones are the Arawaks themselves, while others, including the aforementioned Barbadian tourism website, say that they were fig trees that grew on the island. These Portuguese sailors would likely have flown this flag on their ships, a white field with the Portuguese coat of arms of the time on it. Meanwhile, the Spanish Empire was also taking interest in Barbados during the 1500s, mostly to take the Arawaks as slaves. The flag the Spanish Empire was using at the time was a white field with a red, jagged cross, known as the Cross of Burgundy, on it. However, in the end, it was neither the Portuguese Empire nor the Spanish Empire that would acquire Barbados. On May 14th, 1625, an English ship, the Olive Blossom, became the first English vessel to land in Barbados. At around the same time, England claimed and acquired the island as part of its empire, which had already settled Virginia, Bermuda, and Massachusetts at this time. Shortly after the arrival of the olive blossom, English settlement began on February 17, 1627. Then, in 1639, Barbados got its first colonial parliament, at the time consisting of the plantation owners that composed the colonial elite. Although this old parliament was a far cry from the modern elected parliament of Barbados, the fact that this assembly was established so early on makes the Parliament of Barbados the third oldest legislature in the entire Americas, behind only the Virginia General Assembly and the House of Assembly of Bermuda. Because this is a Sigillum Multarum episode, I will be mentioning the flags that would be flown at this time. The flag of England was, and is, a white field with the St. George's Cross on it. In addition, ships coming from the British Isles flew an early version of the Union Jack, the St. George's Cross imposed on the St. Andrew's Cross of Scotland. These two flags were the norm in Barbados for the rest of the 17th century, except for the era from 1652 until 1660, when the island was ruled by the Commonwealth of England, whose various flags we have already covered in a previous video. Aside from that quick change of flags during the English Civil War, the flags used in Barbados did not change too much. In fact, from 1660 until 1816, there are only two changes to the flag of Barbados. The first one, in 1707, was less a change in flags and more a change in the status of flags, with Scotland formally merging with England to form the Kingdom of Great Britain. The Union Jack went from being a mere naval jack to being a national flag, replacing the St. George's Cross as the flag of the newly formed British Empire's colonies. The second change in Barbadian flags occurred in 1801, when Ireland merged into Great Britain to form the United Kingdom, resulting in the St. Patrick's Saltire being added to the Union Jack. Then, in 1816, a significant event would occur that not only briefly introduced a new flag to Barbados, but would have an impact on the history of both Barbados and its neighbouring British colonies. From April 14th to April 16th, 1816, an African-born slave by the name of Buzza led 400 of his fellow slaves in an uprising against slavery in Barbados. This uprising, now known as Buzza's Rebellion, was quickly crushed by the British forces, but not before it became the largest slave revolt in Barbadian history. This uprising also helped to shake public opinion on slavery in favor of abolitionism, with Buzza's Rebellion being followed by an 1823 rebellion in British Guyana and then 1831 to 1832 uprising in Jamaica. Eventually, slavery was abolished throughout most of the British Empire, including the British colonies in the Caribbean in 1834. To this day, Buzza is considered a national hero of Barbados, with a statue of him even being built in Bridgetown in 1985. Returning to flags, one sketch made at the time shows a flag that one British soldier captured from Buzza's rebels. This flag is an orange field with a message written on it. I have not been able to read the full message, but it appears to say, "Royal Endeavour once forever," with the letters GR written next to it. The letters GR appears to be the royal monogram of King George III. As far as I could tell, the letters GR themselves stand for Georgius Rex, the Latin name for King George. Both the reference to royal endeavour and the usage of the king's monogram are supposed to express that Buzza and his followers were loyal to the United Kingdom and to the British Crown, but they wanted to be free from slavery. In other words, Buzza was fighting against slavery, but not against British rule. Makes it quite ironic that the British government responded to this rebellion with violence against those who were technically loyal subjects of the British Crown. Either way, this flag is significant, not just for its association with one of the later slave revolts, which led to the eventual abolition of slavery in the British Empire, but also for another vexillological reason. As far as I could tell, the flag of Buzza's Rebellion was the first flag to fly over Barbados to be designed specifically to represent Barbados and its people, as opposed to their colonial empires. Moving on with the history of Barbados, From 1800 to 1885, the colony of Barbados was the headquarters of a much larger British colony called the British Windward Islands, which at that time also included what is now Grenada, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and Tobago. However, Barbados' membership in the British Windward Islands had no direct effect on its flags, because Barbados became a separate colony in 1885, a year before the British Windward Islands adopted its first flag. However, it was during this time that Barbados' first colonial flag was adopted. In 1870, Barbados adopted a blue ensign defaced with the colonial arms of Barbados. Britannia, the personification of Great Britain, holding a trident in her hand while riding two horses with fishtails. A similar red ensign was also used by Barbadian ships. These two flags would be used for the rest of the history of British rule in Barbados. That is the history of flags in Barbados from Portuguese arrival until the adoption of the Barbadian ensigns of 1870. Now, let's move on to our next session. The two independences. Throughout the rest of the 19th century and into the 20th century, Barbados remained a British colony with the aforementioned blue ensign. However, throughout the 20th century, more and more Barbadians began calling for self-government. In fact, the Great Depression of the 1930s caused a large number of Barbadians to call for, among other things, better working conditions, the legalization of labor unions, and the introduction of universal suffrage to Barbados. In 1938, the British Imperial government responded to these calls by sending a West Indies Royal Commission to examine the social conditions of Barbados. The Royal Commission, also called the Moyne Commission, concluded that the Barbadian demands should be implemented. These demands were implemented throughout the 1940s, with the franchise being extended to the poor and to women by 1942, and full universal suffrage being granted in 1950. It was during this time that several flag changes occurred in Barbados, to match the various political changes happening at the time. During the 1950s, Barbados remained a British colony with a blue ensign. However, this flag would be joined by another flag in the late 1950s. On January 3, 1958, several of the UK's Caribbean colonies, including Barbados, merged to form the West Indies Federation, a federation of British colonies that was established with the eventual goal of becoming an independent Commonwealth realm, inspired by Canada. You could learn more about it in this other video, which I'll link you to down in the description. Anyway, the federation was composed of 12 provinces, formed from the British colonies that merged to form the federation. The provinces included Antigua, Barbados, the Cayman Islands, Dominica, Grenada, Jamaica, Montserrat, St. Christopher, Nevis and Grenada, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Trinidad and Tobago, and the Turks and Caicos Islands. Despite it and its provinces still being British colonies, the West Indies Federation had its own Supreme Court, a federal parliament, and even a Prime Minister, who was also the first Premier of Barbados. The Federation also had its own flag, a blue field with white waves on it with a golden disc imposed upon the center. The gold disc represented the sun shining over the Caribbean Sea, which is depicted with the blue field and white waves. As a result, it became known as the Sun and Seas flag. The West Indies also had its own naval ensign, a white field with a red cross on it with the federal flag on the canton. This flag was based on the white ensign of the UK. However, the Federation was plagued with a variety of problems, including, among others, struggles between the federal government and the provinces, struggles between the large provinces and the small provinces, a weak federal government, the Federation still being a British colony, the absence of a customs union resulting in provinces charging tariffs for goods from other provinces, nationalist movements in each province, and my personal favorite, the location of the Federation's capital. Legally, the capital of the West Indies was in the town of Chaguaramas, located in Trinidad. However, the peninsula that Chaguaramas was located on, including the town itself, was being leased to the United States Navy as a military base. The Federation wound up operating, for lack of a better word, out of the city of Port de Spain, located a few kilometers east. Though unsurprisingly, the Chaguaramas blunder was quite a problem. On September 19, 1961, Jamaica, the largest province, held a referendum on whether or not to secede from the Federation. 54.1% of Jamaicans voting to leave the Federation. Then, on January 14th the next year, the government of the second largest province, Trinidad and Tobago, began calling for the dissolution of the West Indies Federation. The Trinidadian Premier, Eric Williams, even quipped, 1 from 10 leaves not, suggesting that the Federation can't continue to exist without Jamaica. This quote is still famous in Trinidad and Tobago. Because of all these problems, on May 31st, 1962, the West Indies Federation formally dissolved, leaving the 12 provinces to revert to being separate British colonies. Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago became fully independent later that year, followed by 7 of the other provinces. One of the provinces that followed this route was Barbados, which briefly became a separate colony with its old blue ensign for another 4 months after the Federation collapsed. However, on November 15, 1966, the British Parliament passed a law granting Barbados independence as a Commonwealth realm, with effect on November 30th. In the run-up to Barbadian independence, the Barbadian government held a competition to design a new flag for an independent Barbados, to replace the blue ensign. Over 1,000 designs were submitted, with the winning design being this flag, a blue-gold-blue flag with a trident head on it. This flag was designed by one Grantley W. Prescott, and was the one adopted by the Barbadian government upon independence on November 30th, 1966. At the same time, the Barbadian red ensign was replaced by a white ensign featuring a red cross with the broken trident on the canton. Both flags are still in use to this day, even as Barbados becomes a republic. That is the history of Barbadian flags. Now, let's go over the symbolism. Symbolism. The flag of Barbados makes use of symbolism in a pretty straightforward way. The blue on the sides represents the sky and the sea surrounding Barbados, while the gold represents the sand on Barbados itself. As for the trident head, there is some clever symbolism there. You may remember the old flag of Barbados, with Britannia holding a trident while riding seahorses. Well, the trident head was derived from that old colonial flag, with the trident head being broken off from Britannia's trident, hence the flag's nickname of the Broken Trident. Therefore, the trident head represents Barbadian independence from the UK. As for the 3 points of the trident head, they represent the principles of democracy, which I'll leave to our guest star.
That this nation, under God, shall have a new birth of freedom, and that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
75 years on, my country's President Lincoln still has a legacy. The Barbadian trident's points references the same principles listed in the US's own Gettysburg Address in 1863. That is the symbolism of the flag of Barbados. Now, on to the outro. And now you know more about the flag of Barbados. In this video, we have covered the history of Barbadian flags, and Barbados itself, as well as the symbolism of the current one. We have done all of this while commemorating the establishment of the world's newest republic. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like on it. If you enjoyed this entire channel, subscribe to it. And if you want to know our next video will be coming out, click the bell button after you subscribe. And I'll see you in the next video.